The room was full of laughter, just not mine. I stood there, holding the tray of food I'd prepared, watching as my family huddled together, whispering, their eyes darting toward me before turning away. My new home, the one I had spent 7 years saving for, was glowing with warm lights, polished floors, and walls I had painted with my own hands. Yet the very people I built it for never showed up. I'd imagined this moment so many times. Hugs at the doorway, the smell of fresh bread, my mom's proud smile. Instead, there was silence. Not a single knock on the door. Later that night, I saw the photos. My family, celebrating together at my brother's house. My housewarming had been ignored, erased, as if my effort, my sacrifice, meant nothing. My brother smirked in one picture, his arm lifted in a toast. He thought this would break me, but he had no idea what was coming. I wasn't born into luxury. My earliest memories are of watching my parents argue about bills, the thin envelopes with final notice stamped across them, and my mom rationing out food so there'd be enough for everyone. Even as a kid, I knew money wasn't just about comfort, it was about survival. Maybe that's why I started saving so young. My first job was at a dusty convenience store down the street, the kind where the air smelled like old coffee and fried food. Every shift, I'd tuck a few crumpled bills into a chipped piggy bank I kept hidden in my closet. Over time, it wasn't just money, it was hope, sealed in ceramic. While I worked, my older brother, Daniel, always found shortcuts. He was charming, quick with jokes, the kind of guy who could sweet-talk his way out of responsibility. My parents adored him. "Daniel's got charisma," my father used to say. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who, according to them, would be fine on their own. That line stung more than I ever let on, because what they really meant was, "You don't need us." But I did. As the years rolled on, the favoritism became sharper. When Daniel wanted to start a business, my parents dipped into their savings to help him. When I asked for a small loan to help cover tuition, they told me to apply for scholarships. When he threw a party, the whole family dressed up and celebrated. When I graduated, the living room was half empty. Still, I kept saving. Through every rejection, every side-eye comment, every, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" I kept filling that piggy bank. Then, after college, I found steady work, moving into accounting, boring to everyone else, but to me, it was a kind of power. Numbers were honest. They didn't play favorites. 7 years. That's how long it took. 7 years of missed vacations, packed lunches, thrift store clothes, and nights where the only sound in my apartment was the whir of a ceiling fan. 7 years of telling myself, one day, it'll be worth it. The day I signed the deed to my house, my hands shook so hard I almost dropped the pen. The realtor congratulated me, but it wasn't her voice I wanted to hear. It was my mother's. I wanted her to say, "I'm proud of you." So I planned the housewarming. I cooked my mother's favorite dishes, polished every corner, and strung up warm golden lights on the porch. I even framed an old photo of the whole family, back when we were kids, before the distance, before the lines were drawn. But on the morning of the party, I got the first sting. My sister called. "Hey," she said softly, "Daniel's planning something at his place tonight. I don't think people will make it to yours." Her words hit harder than she knew. It wasn't just people, it was my family. That night, my living room was spotless, the food laid out, glasses waiting to be filled. But the clock ticked on, and no one came. Not even out of obligation. Hours later, scrolling on my phone, I saw the pictures. My family crowded around Daniel's new pool table, laughing, glasses raised. My housewarming had been replaced, overshadowed, ignored. Daniel's grin in one of those pictures. It wasn't careless. It was deliberate. Like he wanted me to see. Like he wanted me to know that, once again, he had won. And that night, standing in the glow of lights I'd hung with trembling hands, I realized This wasn't just neglect. It was humiliation. A performance staged at my expense. And that was the first time I felt the ember of something hotter than hurt. It was the beginning of war. The morning after the failed housewarming, my phone buzzed with a notification. Daniel had tagged the whole family in a post. "Thank you to everyone who came to celebrate my new place last night. Couldn't ask for a better family." The words stung more than the photos. They weren't just a celebration. They were a statement. My housewarming hadn't just been ignored. It had been erased. At work, I tried to bury myself in numbers, spreadsheets, and invoices. But the silence of my empty home weighed on me. Every corner I had scrubbed, every light I had hung, it all felt like a stage set for ghosts. Still, I told myself, ignore it. Move on. But Daniel wasn't finished. Over the next few weeks, he began dropping subtle digs. At Sunday dinner, he leaned back in his chair, smirking, and said, "Not everyone's cut out to host. Some people just don't have that charm." The table chuckled. My parents smiled politely, not defending me. When I mentioned the new house, my father cleared his throat. "Well, Daniel's place has a pool, you know." He's always been the entertainer. It was like my house didn't exist, like my 7 years of sacrifice were invisible. I stayed quiet, pushing food around my plate, swallowing the burn in my chest. But silence only seemed to fuel Daniel. Soon, he started inviting relatives over, sometimes on the very days he knew I was planning small gatherings. I'd find out through social media, scrolling past photos of cousins and uncles laughing in his backyard. When I asked my mother why she hadn't come to mine, she sighed. "Oh, honey, Daniel just makes it easier for everyone. He's magnetic." Magnetic. That word echoed in my mind, as though I were the opposite, something people turned away from. At night, sleep came in fragments. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, hearing echoes of their laughter from photos, feeling the ache in my chest. My body began to betray me, clenched jaw, tension headaches, a constant tightness in my stomach. One night, unable to bear the silence, I took out the piggy bank I'd kept for years. Its ceramic surface was chipped, the paint faded, but inside was the sound of coins rattling like memories. I turned it over in my hands and whispered, "This is proof. I built this." But proof didn't erase loneliness. Then, something shifted. A week later, as I was leaving work, my colleague Marissa stopped me. She was sharp, observant, with the kind of presence that made you feel seen. "You okay?" she asked, her brow furrowing. I forced a smile. "Just tired." She tilted her head. "You know, I saw your pictures. Your house looks amazing. Seriously, you should be proud." Her words hit harder than she realized. For the first time, someone acknowledged it. Someone noticed. And in that small moment, something inside me cracked open. Because if one person could see me, maybe others could too. That was the first time someone reminded me I wasn't alone. The shift didn't come all at once. It crept in, like shadows stretching across the floor before nightfall. Daniel began planting rumors, subtle at first. He's struggling to keep up with that mortgage. Then louder. He rushed into buying the house. Probably drowning in debt, I'd overhear fragments at family dinners, whispered too loudly to be accidental. One night my aunt leaned over her plate and asked, "Are you sure you can afford that place? Maybe you should have waited." Daniel smirked into his glass. The more I ignored him, the bolder he grew. Then came the ambush. My mother invited me to what she called a family meeting. I arrived hopeful, thinking maybe finally they'd see me. Instead, I walked into Daniel sitting at the head of the dining table, my parents flanking him like advisors. "We're worried about you," he said smoothly, steepling his fingers. "Owning a home is a big responsibility. Maybe you should consider letting Daniel manage it for a while, just until you're stable. The air drained from the room. "Manage my house?" I repeated. Daniel leaned back, eyes gleaming. "Think about it. You work long hours. You're not exactly social. Homes aren't just bricks. They're about community. And I'm good at bringing people together." My father nodded as if the idea made sense. My mother wrung her hands, avoiding my eyes. It wasn't just insult. It was theft disguised as concern. "I saved for 7 years," I said, my voice low but steady. "I don't need a manager. Least of all, you." For the first time, Daniel's smirk faltered. Just for a second. Then he doubled down. "You're making a mistake. People already think you're isolated. When you crash, and you will, don't say we didn't try to help." That night, I drove home with my chest burning. The streetlights blurred in my vision. They weren't just ignoring me anymore. They were circling like vultures, waiting for me to stumble. But what Daniel didn't know was that I had been keeping everything. Receipts, bank statements, the deed with my name printed in bold letters, every loan I hadn't taken, every payment made on time. Numbers don't lie. And unlike family loyalty, they can't be twisted into favoritism. I spread the papers across my dining table, the lamplight casting sharp shadows over them. Proof of every sacrifice. Proof of truth. And in that moment, I realized something. Daniel didn't want my house. He wanted my erasure. But I wasn't going to vanish. The next day, I confided in Marissa at work. She listened, her jaw tightening as I explained. When I finished, she placed a hand on the stack of papers I'd brought. "You've got everything you need," she said. "You're stronger than you think. Don't let them rewrite your story." Her words lodged deep, steadying me like an anchor. Daniel thought he still had control. He didn't. After that so-called family meeting, Daniel didn't slow down. He sharpened. The rumors spread wider. At church, an old neighbor pulled me aside and whispered, "I heard you're already behind on payments. Are you okay?" Her eyes were pitying, the kind reserved for someone circling the drain. I clenched my jaw, thanked her, and walked away. Inside, rage swelled. Daniel was poisoning the very air around me. Soon the smear campaign went beyond whispers. He started inviting extended relatives, family friends, even neighbors over to his house. Barbecues, poker nights, holiday parties, always posted online, always tagged. The caption was always the same. "Family is everything." And in every smiling photo, there was one glaring absence: me. At first it gutted me. I'd sit in my living room at night, scrolling, my chest hollow. But slowly, something shifted. The humiliation began to harden into resolve. I started keeping records. Every rumor, every post, every conversation where someone repeated his lies. My desk became a fortress of manila folders, labeled and precise. If Daniel wanted a war, then I would fight like an accountant, methodical, relentless, undeniable. Marissa became my sounding board. Over late-night coffee runs, she'd remind me, "Documentation is power. Don't just defend yourself. Build your case." I listened. And I acted. I called the bank and ordered full statements. I pulled my credit reports. I printed proof of every mortgage payment, each one stamped "paid in full." I even requested a notarized copy of my deed. The piggy bank, chipped and faded, sat on the shelf above my desk. Once it had been a child's hope. Now, it was a weapon. Proof that from the very beginning, I had built this life with nothing but grit and patience. Meanwhile, Daniel began to crack. The charm that had once made him magnetic started to slip. He boasted louder, drank more, laughed a little too hard at his own jokes. He pushed harder on the narrative of my supposed failure, almost as if he was desperate to make others believe it before he himself stopped believing. One evening, I caught him in a lie. At a family dinner, he declared, "He's already missed 2 payments. Mom, Dad, I told you he's not ready." I slid a folder across the table. Inside, the most recent mortgage statements, paid, stamped, official. The silence was thick. My father's brows knit, my mother's lips pressed tight. Daniel's hand twitched as he flipped the papers, color rising in his face. I leaned back, calm. Numbers don't lie. The room was still, the tension electric. For the first time, the smug certainty drained from his eyes. He covered it quickly, forcing a laugh. Relax, it was just a joke. But it wasn't. Everyone knew it wasn't. That night, as I drove home, my pulse raced. Not from fear, but from clarity. He was slipping. His empire of lies was beginning to crumble, brick by brick. And deep down, I knew one thing. The day of reckoning was coming, and no one could stop it. The days after the anniversary dinner felt different. For years, I had walked into family gatherings with the weight of invisibility pressing on my chest. But this time, when I arrived, conversations paused, not out of dismissal, but out of something closer to respect. Daniel, on the other hand, shrank. His voice wasn't as loud, his jokes fell flat. People who once orbited him like satellites now kept their distance, their eyes flicking toward me as if waiting to see how I'd respond. He tried, of course. A few days later, he cornered me in the parking lot after church. His smile was thin, brittle. "You embarrassed me," he hissed. I met his gaze, steady. "No, Daniel. You did that yourself." For the first time, he had no comeback. At home, I framed the deed and hung it on the wall above my desk. The piggy bank sat on the shelf beside it, not chipped and forgotten, but honored, a reminder of where everything began. Its faded paint no longer looked worn. It looked proud. Life didn't transform overnight. My parents didn't suddenly shower me with affection. Old habits take time to break. But there was a shift. My mother began calling more often, asking about my week instead of Daniel's. My father, once skeptical, stopped questioning whether I was ready for responsibility. The balance wasn't perfect, but it was no longer one-sided. And I changed too. I stopped waiting for validation that never came. Instead, I filled my house with new people, chosen family, friends like Marissa, who showed up with laughter and warmth. The once empty living room echoed with voices, not silence. For the first time, I wasn't imagining company. I was living it. Daniel faded into the background. His parties grew smaller, his charm thinner. Without the shadow of my supposed failure to feed on, his empire crumbled quietly. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. His downfall wasn't my victory. It was just the natural consequence of his own choices. My victory was peace. One evening, I stood on the porch, golden lights glowing above me, the same ones I'd hung for the housewarming that never was. But this time, the chairs were filled. Plates clinked, voices rose in conversation, and the air was alive with warmth. I glanced at the framed deed through the window, then at the piggy bank on the shelf. Once, they had been symbols of struggle and loneliness. Now, they were proof of resilience, of triumph earned coin by coin, year by year. I smiled, breathing in the night air. The contrast between that first night, empty rooms, silence, rejection, and this moment was stark. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The days after the anniversary dinner felt different. For years, I had walked into family gatherings with the weight of invisibility pressing on my chest. But this time, when I arrived, conversations paused. Not out of dismissal, but out of something closer to respect. Daniel, on the other hand, shrank. His voice wasn't as loud. His jokes fell flat. People who once orbited him like satellites now kept their distance, their eyes flicking toward me as if waiting to see how I'd respond. He tried, of course. A few days later, he cornered me in the parking lot after church. His smile was thin, brittle. "You embarrassed me," he hissed. I met his gaze, steady. "No, Daniel. You did that yourself." For the first time, he had no comeback. At home, I framed the deed and hung it on the wall above my desk. The piggy bank sat on the shelf beside it. Not chipped and forgotten, but honored. A reminder of where everything began. Its faded paint no longer looked worn. It looked proud. Life didn't transform overnight. My parents didn't suddenly shower me with affection. Old habits take time to break. But there was a shift. My mother began calling more often, asking about my week instead of Daniel's. My father, once skeptical, stopped questioning whether I was ready for responsibility. The balance wasn't perfect, but it was no longer one-sided. And I changed too. I stopped waiting for validation that never came. Instead, I filled my house with new people, chosen family, friends like Marissa, who showed up with laughter and warmth. The once empty living room echoed with voices, not silence. For the first time, I wasn't imagining company. I was living it. Daniel faded into the background. His parties grew smaller, his charm thinner. Without the shadow of my supposed failure to feed on, his empire crumbled quietly. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. His downfall wasn't my victory. It was just the natural consequence of his own choices. My victory was peace. One evening, I stood on the porch, golden lights glowing above me, the same ones I'd hung for the housewarming that never was. But this time, the chairs were filled. Plates clinked, voices rose in conversation, and the air was alive with warmth. I glanced at the framed deed through the window, then at the piggy bank on the shelf. Once, they had been symbols of struggle and loneliness. Now, they were proof of resilience, of triumph earned coin by coin, year by year. I smiled, breathing in the night air. The contrast between that first night, empty rooms, silence, rejection, and this moment was stark. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Maybe you felt it too, the sting of being overlooked, dismissed, erased by the very people who were supposed to stand by you. Maybe you know what it's like to give everything, only to have someone try to take it away. But here's what I learned. Worth isn't something they hand you. It isn't built on their approval, their praise, or their spotlight. Worth is something you claim for yourself, day by day, choice by choice, coin by coin. So tell me, have you faced betrayal, favoritism, or the abuse of power in your own life? How did you rise above it? Share your story in the comments. Because the more we speak, the less power silence has. Remember this. They can try to erase you, but they can't erase the truth. Your worth was never theirs to give. It was always yours to keep.